What was the homework for today?
Interface.
I'll make the interface for the thing. All right. I think we kind of design it in Keynote. We just need to do what?
Do it for us.
Oh, right. Okay. This is 300. Ha! Look how pretty that is. Now that's professional design right there, people. And well, yeah. You done. All right, so a couple things. Everybody saw the hackathon signups, all that stuff. Everybody's been in contact with their teams one way or another. All right, should be starting to brainstorm ideas, whether you're mobile or VR, and the guidelines for the projects are up there. And I'm going to be creating. We already have the starter project for VR. I'll be creating the starter projects for Android. Are any of you doing an iOS app in here? Or is everybody either doing Android or VR? All right. Well, I'll probably make the starter project for iOS then too, just in case.
Are you gonna do any boot camps?
Well, we didn't have one planned. We still have the video from last year's boot camp, but technically that is a
Yeah, because one of our team.
that's VRTK. Well, we could do a boot camp. I'm trying to think what night would work for that.
Do you have night classes?
Well, tonight won't work because we have the Grace movie, and I'm already meeting with a group of students. We're doing some 3D game design stuff. I mean, we're doing VR stuff, but not like a boot camp style thing. I don't have a night class tomorrow. I'm meeting with them until 7 o'clock tomorrow. I wonder, would tomorrow night work?
It was not for me. It's one of our team members. We use Unity. He's a freshman, so I thought like.
Well, I wonder. Do you remember his name?
Blaine.
Oh, he doesn't need it.
Oh, he's a bullshit.
No. He is one of the people in that group. So you're Blaine Andrada, right? Yeah. I mean, he's not an expert in it, but he's familiar with it enough.
Oh.
Is that who?
Because he was like. Yeah, Blaine.
Yeah,
He mentioned that he was freshman. Like.
Right. He effectively made the startup thing for it.
Oh.
I taught him how to do it, and then he came on Saturday morning when I posted on Slack that I was coming in to work on the VR starter thing. He was one of like the 5 students that showed up, and then he actually added to that. So part of what you have as a starter project is what he made. So he's familiar with Unity. I don't know about better, but he's familiar. Okay. And I think everybody in here is signed up for the hackathon, right? Nobody's having to do the. Did you read that assignment?
It actually does sound really cool. Like I would do that for extra credit.
You would do that for extra credit, so I should think about doing that for extra credit, is what you're saying?
Well, I maybe want to do all 12 pages, but
like 20 pages, maybe?
If it's because it's like 3 different assignments, if I did like 1 4-page one for an assignment, I would do that.
Do you think it's a good assignment?
How you worded it really confused me.
Well, everything I word is confusing.
Because he said, I'm going to find it just because I don't want
Well, not hackathons, just actually, I don't think that's any more close to it. You've used some of the same words. It's effectively the struggle of learning to be a computer programmer and relate that to one or more Bible stories from the New Testament.
Right, but how you worded it was like, why is learning computer science in a Christian university a bad thing? It's kind of like the vibe I got from
Really?
Yeah, because write a 12-page paper that confronts the challenge of learning to program from a biblical perspective.
Okay.
So, like, why is it challenging?
I understand. My intention was make the argument of why it's difficult and support it from a biblical perspective. But I get what you're saying.
So I'm like, what? What
Although I think the other thing, there is some truth to it, and it's not learning computer science. It's learning really any science in a Christian university. There's uh, kind of some tough spots there. You know, when you're having one class talking about theology that's going off on some very biblical thing, and then you have a science class that's talking about things that start bordering on evolution and things like that. Well, those things are in conflict with each other. I think that's why I like that cosmogony class that Dr. Locklear teaches. It introduces both things and tries to talk through them. Okay, so let's start doing this interface dealy flippy. So we need to have a probably a text view. So kind of a label thing for our name, a label thing for our description, or possibly something else for our description since it might be multi-line. Then we're going to have, this guy needs to be something that we can edit. So this is going to be probably a vertical linear layout inside of a scroll view that we can throw in the characters that are in the room. We could even do a couple of these if we wanted to have a separate list for the NPCs and players. I'm not sure if that's necessary, but we could. And then a label for obvious exits, and then 4 buttons here, and we could try to get them organized in this fashion and figure that out. Okay, so let's go into Android Studio. Do I already have my... All right, so there is my beautiful empty interface. So we'll go ahead and start dumping stuff. I'll throw in my starter vertical linear layout in here. Okay, and then we want to have I'm going to go ahead and set the gravity for this guy to be center horizontal. I'm hoping that sucks everything to the middle. We'll go ahead and throw our text view in here. And we will center the text in this guy. Well, the text we want to have in there, this is going to be the name. We'll just put it as a placeholder right now. And we will... It doesn't give me the alignment in here.
I was wondering that.
It seems like a simple thing that it should give you the...
Like new alignment or old alignment?
No, just make this centered.
The old version used to have it.
So they actually took it away. Like I would have thought it'd be in this area right here.
Yeah.
While we're in here, let's make this a little bit bigger. So I'll set the gravity to center. Center horizontally, okay. So there's our name. Then we're gonna have another text view probably called, I'm gonna have like a description one. Called description. I'm actually going to left align that one. So that's going to be kind of the label for our description, something like that. So we will go ahead and I wish that they had gravity more prominent because I don't really know my alphabet all that well. It should be right here, right? Oh, do I have it selected? Yeah, it should be. Oh, like it moved it up top. See, I knew it better than you thought I did. I knew the alphabet better than you thought.
I just saw the eyes at the bottom now.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's,
maybe he's just too
But I think she was right. I think things that you've used get moved up top to make them more available, but then that confuses you as to where they should be. It does seem kind of ridiculous. Okay, so now let's pick a thing for our description. So I'll go over under text here. Maybe under widgets. I don't know, just something to hold like multiple lines of text. I mean, worst case, we'll just use a text view. We're just looking for something flashier in case our descriptions become awesome. Here's a container. Maybe a text view gets us. Maybe we could have a multi-line text view. Throw that in there.
Is that because the little link keep going on one line?
I don't know. That's a good question because it does say wrap content. So let's grab some content that we can steal. Let's see. Yeah, we'll grab something off the. Well, that's not right. I just want to grab a paragraph from somewhere. There we go. So we'll go ahead and set the text in there to that guy. Oh yeah, it gives us multi-lines. So it's set to automatically wrap. That seems reasonable enough. All right, so let's go ahead and name these guys so we don't forget. So this guy's going to be name TF or TV. We don't need to change this guy. He's just a placeholder for like saying this is the description coming next. This is going to be the description. TV. Okay. Then what comes next in our plan? Then we're going to have a scroll view that we're going to dynamically put some text stuff into. All right, so we'll have a scroll view with a vertical linear layout in it. So is that one of our widgets or a container? Container. Layouts. Scroll view. All right, and he comes with a vertical linear layout. So we need to have access to that vertical linear layout so that we can add stuff to it. That's going to be a view group inside of our code. All right, so we'll go ahead and give ourselves programmatic access to this. So this is going to be our also here. View group, something like that. Good enough. Okay, and just for placeholder's sake, so we can kind of see it, I'm going to go ahead and throw a text view inside here. And I'm going to say players, and then I'm going to throw another one in there too for NPCs. Oh, hold on. I guess it doesn't really matter what I call him because we're going to be deleting him anyways, but I wanted to say players. And then I'm going to steal this one, paste it, and this guy will say NPCs. All right, just to give us an idea on the stuff that's living in there. I am kind of thinking that when we design this, though, let's just pretend like we're putting another player in here. let's say this is player Mike, that maybe we go ahead and we make gravity center horizontal. This one. I don't know if that's even. I don't really like that. We can put spaces. Let's see how that might look. So let's do. Well, we can. I was just trying to get the right look because we're going to actually end up dumping all these.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to. So it looks like maybe 10 spaces, kind of indents the text underneath their labels or whatever to give us a decent view. All right.
5 spaces on the tab.
Five spaces. Go ahead.
Do you not have a colon in your ID?
Possibly. I don't know. I think you probably could. Doesn't seem to be screaming about those things. But we're going to be dumping them anyways. That was a mistake that I put. I renamed the ID. It used to be TextView or something like that. All right, so it looks like 10 spaces is going to look okay. So that just gives us an idea how we're going to do that. Now for the height of our scroll view, we probably want to have it wrap content. That way it doesn't suck all the way down to the bottom of the screen to fill the parent. All right, so we're going to have it wrap just however big that view group gets. Now, we might, as you get lots and lots of stuff into the room, we might end up coming back in and actually giving it a physical final height. Otherwise, if you get 500 people in the room, it actually would go all the way down to the bottom of the screen because it would wrap the content till it hits the bottom of the screen. And now everything else that's below this, we could shoved off the screen. Whereas if we just go ahead and say, well, the biggest we want this thing to be is 100, something like that, then the scrollable aspect of it will be in there. And we can actually maybe reset that once we get the other stuff designed below. But, that's just something to think about as you get, lots and lots of people in the room, which I don't suspect is going to be a real problem for us. But it's something to consider. Okay? So we'll leave that like that for right now. What else am I supposed to have? All right, then a text view for obvious exits. And this guy's going to be a problem. All right. Text view for obvious exits. Let me make sure I named my, pretty sure I did. Yeah, also here view group, so I have that. I don't need to know about the scroll view. Okay, so we have that. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw a text view in here for obvious exits. And we'll bump the font size for that. Was it the 18? It looks like 24 is what I picked for those other ones. And we can make it bold. It's really frustrating that you can't center from in here. So we'll center horizontally. All right, so there's our obvious exits. And let's go ahead and we'll bold our description and name as well. Okay. Then obvious exits we decided is going to be some buttons. So we're going to have 4 buttons that we're going to be either able to turn off or on or whatever. All right, so we want to design this to, kind of look like a, well, how we designed it is kind of look like almost the D-pad on a Nintendo controller or something like that. All right, so let's see how close we can get to something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw a vertical linear layout in here as my starting tool for this. So we'll give ourselves a vertical linear layout, toss it in here. All right, and then let's go ahead and get all of our buttons in there first. So at the top level, we're going to have our button that says north. So that's under buttons. All right, so this is the north button. And we're going to go ahead and set the width of this guy to wrap content, like that. And I'm going to go ahead and set the gravity of my linear layout to, you know what, I'm going to say center period. We could just do center horizontally and that will move it to the middle. But if it probably actually doesn't matter. We might need to put more stuff in. So we'll leave it like this. Yeah. All right, so that guy looks pretty good. Now, the next row needs to have a west and an east with some buffer in between. So I'll go ahead and throw, and actually I need to, let's name this button. So we're going to call this guy north button. And then I'm going to make, we'll throw another, well, actually, the next row needs to be a horizontal linear layout so I can put two things in that row. So I'll go ahead and throw a horizontal linear layout in here and make sure that guy's height is set to wrap. Actually, let me leave it like this for a second. That way I can land my buttons in there. Then I'll set it to wrap content instead of fill parent. So I'll go ahead and toss a couple of buttons in here. There's one, there's two. Then I'm going to select that horizontal linear layout. Actually, let me push this north button up above there. All right, so there's that guy. And then we'll set this dude's height to wrap content. All right, now let's set these two buttons. This is going to be west. And we'll make the text in it say west. And this guy is going to be south. Oh, thank you. I was testing you. You passed this time. It's going to be east. And then we want to have the width of these guys set to wrap content. I can't have the button wrap content? Or is it the linear layout is squeezing it across? All right, well, let's leave it like that for a second because I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put something in between. So there's, we got some dudes in here. We had like a spacer. All right, so I want to drop that guy right there. So space is adjustable. So here's my space, and I think I can. What happens if I make that a 5? Yeah, that pushes it more. All right, so one looks pretty good. I do want these buttons, though, to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and actually try to put a space before this guy. And I'll put a space after this guy. And then let's weight those spaces. Let's maybe give this guy a 2. And give this guy a 2. It looks almost good. It's solid. All right. Now, another thing we could have done if you didn't see the space is you probably could have put a button in there. And you wouldn't have wanted to make it invisible because I think that would have made it disappear. But you probably could have set like the alpha on it. So if we take a button like this, let me go ahead and set the, actually, let's just set it to invisible. Okay, yeah, actually that would have worked. So what you could have done is you could have thrown another button here in the middle and just made the button invisible, and that would have held the space open even though we couldn't see it. And then you could have probably put buttons on either side to, get it to squish in, but something along those lines. You could have played with things you already kind of knew about. All right, so there's that guy, and then lastly, we're going to throw in our, I did name these guys, right? West button and east button, almost south button. Throw one more button in here. Oh, I didn't want it there. No. Text. Go down to where my new button is. Cut that guy and throw it after the linear layout. Now he's in the right place. I'll go ahead and, why is he stretched out so far? Isn't his linear layout set to, oh, his linear layout should be set to wrap content. There we go. I thought I said that earlier.
I think you said that for the width, but not for the height.
Oh, whatever.
Yeah.
You might be right.
That's something else.
South button, and this guy will say south. Actually, what does he currently say? All right, so looks like a pretty legit something. And does this kind of match what we needed it to match here? We have all our pieces. All right, so now let's go ahead and we're going to connect this whole thing up. So we're going to need this name text view. We're going to need this description text view. We're going to need the 4 buttons, and then we're going to need the also here view group. All right, so let's go into our main activity here. And I'm going to give myself those things up here. So we're going to have a private text view, and we're going to call this name TV, private text view, description TV, and then we need a view group, private view group, also here, view group. And then we're going to need 4 buttons. Private button, north button, private button, south button, private button. Should have just copied and pasted, but whatever. Ship has sailed. All right, so I have all those dudes now, and then we want to go ahead and set them up. So we'll say this dot name TV is equal to this dot, well, this is going to be the text view version. I think we found that that's not required, but I like to write it anyways. This dot find view by ID, r dot ID dot name TV. This dot description TV is equal to the text view version of this dot find view by ID, r dot ID dot description TV. This dot also here view group is equal to the view group version of this dot find view by ID, r dot ID dot also here view group. This dot north button is equal to the button version of this dot find view by ID, r dot ID dot north button. This dot south button, is equal to the button version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot south button. This dot east button is equal to the button version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot east button. And this dot west button is equal to the button version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot west button. Okay, so now we have all those things hooked up. All right, so now we are actually building our dungeon down here, which does all of this stuff, taking exits and things like that. Now, what we'll do, at least for right now, and then we'll reimagine it, we decided that this should work for S120, right? So at the end here, let's go ahead and fill interface for S120 just as an initial dealio thing. All right, so we want to get the name of S120, so we'll say this dot name TV dot set text, and we're going to set the text equal to S120.get. What is S120? S120 is a room. Oh, we don't have getters for name and stuff yet. All right, so we're going to have getters for really everything, right? Yeah, because we're going to need the names of those exits so we can decide to turn the buttons off or on. All right, so generate getters for everything. Just imagine how much worse that would have been before we had the generator. We had to go and type all that stupid stuff. All right, so we're going to set the text. What are we setting it to? We're setting it to s120.getName. This dot description TV dot set text to s120.getDescription. This dot what comes next? Oh, now we need to do the also here view group. Okay, so we're gonna fill the also here view group. So the very first thing we're gonna do is also here view group dot remove all views, because we had some placeholders in there that just kind of allowed us to visually remember that that's what that dude was for. So we got to remember to dump those. All right. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a text view for our that we're going to add. That's going to be for players, and then another one that's going to be for NPCs. Just those are kind of our labels. All right. So we're going to say text view. And we're going to call this guy players label is equal to a new text view. And we have to give it, what, a context? Does this guy take anything else? I think that's it. All right. And then we'll go ahead and say players label dot set text is equal to players. Put a little colon there. And then we're going to do the same thing. Well, let's just go ahead and deal with players first. So we'll go ahead and say this dot also here view group dot add view, and the view we're going to add is our players label. All right, so we threw that guy in there. Now we want to go through all of the players that are in S120, getting each one, and we're going to add 5 extra spaces before each name. All right, so we'll go ahead and we're going to say for, and this guy is going to, these are player objects, right? For player P in s120.get players. So each time through, P will be one of those players. Do I already have a P somewhere? Player. One of them's lowercase p. All right. And so each time through, we want to create a text view for that player with 5 extra spaces before his name and add it to the thing. And I'm gonna go ahead and give myself a temporary text view right before this, just so I can fill it each time. So we'll go ahead and say temp is equal to a new text view. And this text view is going to be made from this context. We'll say temp.setText to 5 spaces concatenated with p.getName. Oh yeah, thank you. What was P up here? Oh, that's his current player. Would have worked. Just a lot of mics in that room. I think there's only one mic in the room anyways. Would have worked. All right, so each time through, we'll create a brand new text view. We'll set the text equal to 5 spaces followed by that dude's name, and then we will add it to our also here dot add view temp. So we'll do that for all the players. All right, then we're going to get our label for our NPCs. So TextView NPC label. Probably didn't need to have this in a separate variable, but whatever. Okay, and we're gonna say NPC label dot set text equal to NPCs like that with a little colon maybe, and then this dot also here. We might end up making those guys bold or something, but let's just do it like this for now. This dot also here view group dot add view NPC label. All right, and we already have our text view temp, so we can just reuse that guy from up there. So now we'll say for NPC in s120.get NPCs. We'll say temp is equal to a new text view. And this guy is going to, well, with context this. And then we'll say temp.setText equal to NPC. Well, we need 5 spaces. And we'll say NPC.getName. And then this dot also here, view group dot add view temp. All right, so that'll add all our NPCs indented a little bit. All right, and then last thing is hide the hide the right buttons. I think I could have spelled that one. Just take a couple tries. Right, Charlie? I could have spelled appropriate. Oh, we're gonna do it. That it? Nailed it. I do have a PhD, so I can spell. I know my ABCs. I almost know my directions. Oh man. Okay, so we're gonna hide the appropriate button. So we're gonna need to go through the exits, asking, is there an exit for a particular, name, and then hide the button if we need to. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna say if s120.get exits. All right, and that guy gives me a map, right? Dot contains key north here. What I'm going to do here right off the bat is I'm going to say this dot north button dot set visibility. have to pick a number.
No, you gotta use a keyword.
Invisible. U.invisible. We'll do this for all 4 of them. So we'll make them all invisible first, then turn them back on. All right, so we have no buttons initially. And then we'll go ahead, and if there is a north, then we will turn north back on. And here we're just going to steal that whole chunk. If there is a south, we'll turn south back on. If there is a east, we'll turn east back on. And if there is a west, we'll turn west back on. All right, so this should show the correct stuff for S120 in theory. All right, so S120 has what in it? We have our, and we need to make sure we don't need to display any of those guys. So they just are what they are. We have added the player P to that. We actually don't have any NPCs. So we should see the name is S120, the description S120 classroom. We have a single exit to the north to S120 hallway. But we'll just see a button that says north. All the other buttons should be hidden. And that's it for this, right? Build failed. What are you upset about? Oh, that's all my stuff that are named bad things. TextView 20, 21, 22. But we don't actually have to have an ID? You might be right. S120. Oh. Well, I changed the wrong thing. This should say description, right? This should say other people. We have the right button showing up. We have the right description. We have the right players and NPCs. Just our hard-coded labels don't look right. All right, so let's go back to here.
Oh, see, on the right hand, like text.
Oh, I see. I have.
I don't know what
It might be the hint. No, that says text to display. What's this guy? That's text to display. That's text to display. Oh, who even knows? See, they should have that guy switch places with gravity. It probably has a use. I just don't know what it is. Well, I should probably hit this button, so I don't have to keep hitting the extra thing. All right, so looks pretty decent. All right, so now if we want to make this a little bit, so is that everything for the homework? All right, so now if we want to make this a little bit more generic, if I want to take all of fill the blah blah blah, where am I at here? Fill the interface, all this stuff. Back one. I'm going to take all of that, and we're going to throw it inside of a function. So private void fill interface. And this guy is going to take a room R as a parameter. And we'll go ahead and paste this. And I should be able to, if I refactor this, will it just do it for this function? Yeah, just did it in here. So I changed all my S120s to R. So now whatever room I pass in here is going to fill the interface. So if I say this dot fill interface S120, we should get the same output as we had before. But if I change that to CS hallway, so now we see that there's, well, did I do the same thing with these buttons for the names? Yep. This is on you, Moa. This is your fault. And Charlie's. All right. All right, so there's CS hallway. So now we can toggle back and forth between the rooms, and if we change the stuff that is happening in those rooms, so if we take the exit to the north first, now we should have Mike in S120, and there's player Mike in S120. Now we might want to bold these. What is that called in our thing? So if I click on the text view, that says text style. So let's go back into this and we'll change our labels a little bit. So this is our player label. Set text style. So like a bold. Let's go to Google. TextView programmatically set bold. Set style bold or italic. Set typeface to typeface bold. typeface. That's bold. Do we want bold and italic or just bold? Bold. Why can that not be applied? Oh, because it takes a typeface and a style. So I'm guessing if what they did in the example is they left the typeface null. So we're not changing the typeface, and then they made the style bold. And then we'll do the same thing down here for our MPC label. Run this. Awesome. Okay, so now, what would be the next logical thing to do? Probably make our buttons work. Now, when a button is clicked, what's it going to do? It's going to show the room at that exit, right? As we move things. So when I hit south, for example, we're presuming that we are player P, right? So when we hit south, we're going to have player P take that south exit, putting them wherever they're going to end up. That south exit, though, is going to tell us where we ended up, right? Because we know when we take that, there is a room associated with that exit. All right, so what I'm going to do up top here, since this is the player playing our game, instead of defining our player here, I'm going to have player P be a private variable up here. We're going to go ahead and define P in our constructor up here. You could have done it in build dungeon too, but let's keep it separate because the player is the person using the app. The dungeon is the dungeon that they are going into. All right, so after we've built the dungeon, we're probably going to want to give ourselves a data structure for our dungeon to actually hold stuff. But let's get the, that way a dungeon can have a default room. So maybe you start in this room or something like that. And then we could say after this line, maybe this guy returns the dungeon. And then we can say, have the, place the player in the dungeon's default room. Something like that. In fact, let's actually write that just so we have that convenience because we're going to actually need it. So we're going to create another class here called dungeon. Okay, and a dungeon is going to have a collection of rooms and it's going to have a start room. All right, so we'll say private room, start room. We'll have a private, maybe we'll have a linked list of rooms because how we store the rooms isn't necessarily important because the link between rooms is not what's in this list. The link between rooms happens within the exits of the rooms. Right, a room contains a collection of a hash map or hash table of exits, and those exits lead to other rooms that live somewhere inside this list, but we need to house those guys somewhere instead of just generic variables like S120 and CS hallway. Okay, so we'll have a private, maybe linked list of room objects called the rooms, maybe called room collection. The collection of all the rooms. Good enough, I guess. Okay. A dungeon probably also has a name. private string name. So this might be CS department is the name of this dungeon. Okay. It's probably good enough for the moment. We can add to it if we need to. So we'll say public dungeon raider constructor for this guy. And this guy is going to go ahead and take in a name. All right. Now, at this point, when we first build the dungeon, we may not actually have any rooms. Potentially, right? So we'll go ahead and say this dot start room is equal to null. And we'll say this dot room collection is equal to a new linked list of room objects. Now, let's say, though, that when we do create the dungeon, we actually do know about the starter room. So public, I'm going to have another constructor that takes in a string name and also takes in a room start room. Now, we pretty much want to do everything we did up here. Oh, sorry. With the exception that we want this guy to be start room, correct? Yeah, and also add it to the collection. Good call. But one of the goals in object-oriented programming is not to duplicate code. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and say super. Actually, not super. We're going to say this and pass it name. So we're going to call one of our other constructors to do the initial setup. So when we say this dot name or this name like this, we're calling this constructor and having him do everything that he does. Then we'll go ahead and we will modify it from there. So we'll say this dot start room is equal to start room. And we'll say this dot room collection dot add this dot start room, or you could just say start room. They're pointers to the same place. That makes sense? So now this constructor is written in terms of this constructor. So this is an example of polymorphism where we have two functions, in this case two constructors that have the same name but a different number and or type of parameters. This is our generic one that the most basic dungeon we can have at least has a name. But if you happen to know the start room right off the bat, you can provide the start room in the constructor. We will then leverage our original constructor as much as we can and then do the couple of things that differentiate it. That makes sense? So this is an object-oriented programming technique to use more than one constructor to build out something. All right. So now we'd like to be able to add a room to our dungeon after rooms are kind of created, right? And the presumption would be that a room already has the exits in it, right? Okay. So we'll say public void add room. Take it room R. Say this dot room collection dot add R. All right, so this gives us write access to that private variable. We probably also want to be able to get the room name, get the start room, and get the room collection. I don't know if we're going to need the room collection at this point. Correct, because this add room adds a room to our dungeon's room collection. So if we think about a dungeon, so computer science department is a collection of rooms. We have this room, we have the hallway, we have the lab down there, we have S118, we have, 5 or 6 rooms, whatever it is. So we're going to have a collection of 6 rooms that live in this dungeon. Those rooms are going to externally be linked to each other. So this room has a northern exit to that hallway has a southern exit to this room. So all the stuff we're already doing is still going to happen. So we kind of have this linked data structure kind of already floating out there, but we want to be able to store that somewhere. store that somewhere. We might try to integrate some of the code we have out there into this. We'll have to look at it here in a second. So let's just leave it like this for now, and let's see what we're going to need access to as we need access to it. We'll write those functions rather than guess at what we need. All right, so when we build this dungeon, we're going to right off the bat, we're going to say, actually, let's give ourselves a global dungeon. Private dungeon CS department. And we'll go ahead and build this dungeon in here. So we'll say this dot CS department is equal to a new dungeon. And right now, we only have 2 rooms. So let's just start with 2 rooms. So I'm actually going to build our dungeon after I've defined my first 2 rooms. That way I can say CS department's the name of the dungeon, and this guy is going to have a starter room of, we're just going to say, well, do we want to say CS hallway? Kind of makes sense, right? That's really the starter thing. All right, so that's going to be our starter room for this. Now, we don't want to add the player to S120 here. Instead, we're going to add a player to a dungeon, and that player will go into the starting room of the dungeon. Okay? So what we'll go ahead and do is in our dungeon, we're going to say public void add player. So a player gets added to a dungeon, and this is going to be player P. And this is this dot starter room dot add player P. So whatever the starter room is for this dungeon, that's where we'll initially throw the player. So in this case, instead of the player being added to this room, it's going to be added to the CS hallway, since that was our starter room. So then what we'll do up here is after we've built our dungeon, then we can assume that CS department now has stuff in it. CS, this dot CS department dot add player P. And it'll add it to whatever the starting room of that dungeon is. Make sense? All right, so building our dungeon, we have a couple of rooms. Now we've instantiated our dungeon. We've used our second constructor that allowed us to name the dungeon, but also let it know what the starter room was. All right, then we are going to, now keep in mind that when a player got added to a dungeon, when we added a player, so that actually happens in room, right? So the dungeon adds the player, but then tells the starter room to add the player. So add player here sets that player's current room, wherever that is. Yeah. Here's add player. So we're going to perform the action add player. Here's perform action. So we're going to get the player we're adding. We'll add them to the room, and then we're going to set that player's current room to that room. So when we add our player to this dungeon, several things are occurring through all of our logic. Player gets added to CS hallway. The player marks that CS hallway is their current room. So that means what we can do is we can initially display the player's current room. At any point in time, what our interface should show is the room the player is currently in. That make sense? And when the player takes an exit and changes to a different room, what do you do afterwards? Show the player's current room. So no matter where the player goes, the thing you want to display on the screen is always the player's current room. Make sense? That last statement there is going to be pretty important for doing your homework. It's going to be the difference between your homework taking 5 minutes or a lot longer. Okay? So, what we'll go ahead and do here, let's go back to main activity. So we build our couple of rooms, then we go ahead and define our dungeon, and then we start linking our rooms. So here, this is, we'll say linking rooms through exits. And this has nothing to do with dungeons, really, because the dungeon is just holding a big basket of rooms. Those rooms kind of have these little tunnels leading to other rooms that the dungeon doesn't care about. It just knows it's kind of holding all that because these are all pointers that that dungeon is holding. So we create the exit that leads between these two rooms. Then we go ahead and add that exit to north and south for those two rooms. And this was us just, testing stuff here. So we can actually go ahead and get rid of that. I'll dump that there. All right, so that's building our dungeon. We'll add a player here, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say this fill interface p.get current room. So we build our player, we build our dungeon, and the result of building our dungeon will be that CS department up here is now filled. So we can even put a little comment here. Did it right there. Well, we could, but right now we just have 2 rooms. But we can, as long as you can map out exits, you can add as many rooms as you want. All right, so we'll have, so CS, well, I think it's going to be a useless comment. So we'll build a dungeon, then we'll go ahead and add the player to that dungeon, which will put them in the default room of the dungeon, which for us is CS hallway. That's how we built it. Right here. That was the default room. Then we'll go ahead and we wrote a function called fill interface. And for filling our interface, it will change our interface to whatever room I pass it. The room I'm going to pass it is the player's current room, which should be CS hallway. Make sense? So let's go ahead and run this guy. So there's CS hallway. Now, what should happen here is if I hit south, this guy should take the exit to the south. And then, as a result of that, this interface should update to show that we're now in S120 with an exit to the north. If I hit north, it should then update, showing me that I now have an exit. Well, then I'm now sitting in CS hallway with an exit to the south. That make sense? All right, so for our homework, make these buttons work and update the interface appropriately.
I think another activity.
No, because we could, every single time you call fill interface, it'll fill the interface for the player's current thing. It'll just update all this stuff. All right, I just want to make sure real quick in fill interface just so you don't have an issue. Yeah. I am removing all the views. That's important. We're doing it initially because we had some placeholder stuff in there, but secondarily we're doing it because we're moving to a new room and we don't want to pile more stuff onto the people who are currently here than we already had. That makes sense? All right, so let me go ahead and commit. Updated for dungeon, waiting for direction buttons to work. Then I'll do commit and push. All right, it's up there. I'll go ahead and add the assignment to Blackboard. And everybody understand what I'm asking you to do for Thursday? Okay, shouldn't be too bad, but make sure you think through it and go and make sure you understand what our current logic does. All right, I will see everybody on Thursday. Remember, today, student, faculty, staff, Bible study, God and Grub. Go to the cafeteria, sign in, get a free lunch, take your tray down to the terrace room. Oh, I'll put the Bible homework up right now as well, just so I don't forget. Thank you.
We do Sunday again.
Yeah, Sunday at midnight.